We are about to go live. Okay. We have 20 seconds.
You mean from where this background noise is coming?
Yeah, that's from my side. Okay, we can start. We are going live in three, two, one, go.
Good evening to one and all of you, wherever you might be tuning into this feed of the inaugural edition of the Economic Times Virtual Tech Summit. My name is Karan Kaghai, and on behalf of the Economic Times, I'd like to welcome you to a panel that will be talking about the growing intersection of artificial intelligence and the customer experience. We've all seen how artificial intelligence is playing an incredible role in the way businesses operate. And in these trying, testing, tumultuous times, it would be a purpose to look at the biggest way that AI is transforming the customer experience. With that in mind, we have a panel of eminent speakers who will be shedding light on this very topic. So without further ado, let's cut to the panelists and see what they have to say on this particular session.
Thank you very much. My name is Rajan Mathews, and I'm the Director General of COAI, representing all of the major mobile operators in India, plus associate members that play alongside with us. We're five very, very prominent panelists. I'm so very happy and proud to have these folks. We have Shantanu Bhattacharya, who is the Chief Data Scientist from Airtel. We have Sanjay Gurbuxani, who is the Global Digital Innovation Lead and Regional CIO from Mondelēz. We have Guru Bhatt, who is the VP Customer Success Platform of PayPal India. We have Ameet Shetty, who's ex-Chief Data and Analyst for McDonald's, and Tim Crawford, all the way in Las Vegas from AVOA. So again, welcome all you folks. Let's go right to the first panelist, Shantanu Bhattacharya. Shantanu, again, you're our rocket scientist by way of background. Tell us what artificial intelligence really means. I hear all kinds of things bandied around. Give us a quick working definition of what artificial intelligence is really all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajan. Thank you for introducing me. Yes, the artificial intelligence, if you do a Google search today, you'll find that this is probably one of the most sort of used, famous, in the news kind of keyword that sort of pops up everywhere. So what is it really? It's essentially, think about this being a human intelligence that's being processed by machines, especially computers, right? So things like when you talk about AI today, they include the natural language processing, which you see application when you call up a call center and trying to make a change to your address, or if you're trying to figure out what your balance is. Very often it's not a human answering on the other end. It's a machine listening to you, understanding your languages, your nuances, your tone, your tonality, your accent, right? And trying to figure out what you're saying and giving you back the answer, especially on the basic stuff. Machine vision. There are systems today, for example, thinking about COVID as an example. There are systems today, safe cameras, right? Which looks at the same CCTVs have been turned into safe machines or intelligent machines, which can look at you and automatically figure out if you're maintaining the safe distancing or wearing a mask, and automatically alert the security saying that someone gathering in the hallway five people next to each other, the security can proceed and disperse that, right? So the AI systems of today have sort of three things, right? One is what is called as a learning process, right? It takes a tons of data and create rules for how to turn data into actionable intelligence. This is how exactly sort of humans learn, and these are sort of called algorithms. The second aspect of it is the reasoning process. Now that you have learned what it is, you try to figure out what the reasons so that you can reach a right desired outcome. And the third process of a human learning is essentially also known as a self-correction process, which is you figured out how to learn, how to reason, but when you make a mistake, someone makes a correction and gets you the right answer. So think of it, I'll give you an example. A child growing up, 3-year-old in a household, 2-year-old in a household. You're trying to teach them which one is a chair and which one is a table. So this is called a supervised learning, right? So you essentially show them a chair with 4 legs and say, that's a chair. So that's your learning process. The child reasons that something with 4 legs is a chair, right? So now the child walks into a table and at the table and say, Papa, chair. He said, no, chair is that one. Now what you're doing is essentially doing a correction process. The child is figuring it's a chair, has a back, table, no back. So the child eventually learns using the exact three process I talked about: learning, reasoning, and self-correction. And once you codify that in a computer program and teach the computer the same set of instructions, it essentially simulates how human learns into a machine, right? Then what are the advantages today? We can all learn what a machine does today. It's just that it will take us infinite amount of time and infinite amount of data. And the human minds, as much as you have 10 billion neurons in your head, haven't evolved to process that in the time scale the machine can. So with that, what's happening today is the machines are able to process this information, take this data, and figure out a way of come to the same outcome that humans would have come probably 10 years, 20 years. Today, the applications of machine learning, if you look at it, if you go to Facebook, the content you are seeing is machine learning generated. You go to Amazon, your recommendation is coming from an artificially expert system. And even more complex. So there's a company in the US called Stitch Fix, which is the best thing for men. Like, men only know two things. Whatever I buy is going to be a wrong decision because my wife will say that didn't fit. So you use a machine to look at, you figure out it takes your picture, it figures out, it asks you for what your styles are, and then essentially recommends you clothes. I mean, think of it this way. It's like your personal design consultant, right? To as complex as the latest helicopters that Sikorsky makes, the rotors of the helicopter that essentially gives a lift and the speed and all that stuff are being controlled by AI systems that can give you a better lift, give you a faster speed without breaking down the edges of the rotors and so on. So life is essentially getting assisted by AI, and in some sense, I mean, all of you are using either Siri or Google Assistant and so on. These are all examples of artificial intelligence that are sort of invading our life or pervading our life.
Thank you, Shantanu. Now let me go to Sanjay. Sanjay, I'm sure you don't need any help with your wardrobe, right? You're Mondelēz, but gosh, you look at your ads, a guy and a girl drooling over chocolate. I said, my God, Cadbury, this is iconic. Anyway, tell us from your end, Sanjay, what are you seeing in terms of artificial intelligence and the customers that you're dealing with in your line of business?
Thanks, Rajan and Shantanu. Well explained with some good examples there. We are seeing AI, of course, grow exponentially, and its usage grow. Yes, there are concerns with data privacy and security, and we may get to that in a little bit. But as we interact with our customers, we are bringing in artificial intelligence in our interactions. And I can maybe give a couple of examples of what we are doing, especially in light of COVID. Now we cannot put enough feet on the ground. For us, our customer, right, just to clarify, for Mondelēz, and we have our brands like Cadbury chocolates, Oreo cookies, Bournvita. Our customers are the retailers, whether it's modern trade, the big bazaars, or the Kinara shops that we see across the country. Today, we are not able to get enough feet on the ground to service these stores. So bringing alive a couple of examples of what we are doing in the COVID scenario, we are building artificial intelligence-based bots, chat bots, and we are all familiar with whether it's WhatsApp, Viber, Facebook Messenger, which are these chat platforms, right? And so, so what we are doing is we're interacting with the shopkeeper, very simply put, and artificial intelligence is using all our previous sales data. It's using Google data on what other stores on that street may be buying. Where is that store physically located? Is it located in a hospital? Is it located in a residential complex? Is it located on a busy street? And then making recommendations of what order that customer should be placing with us, which then simplifies the life of the customer, because they have more today. Yes, they know their market, but they're also struggling to adapt to what the new normal is. And now we have a machine that is fast learning from the environment, fast learning from what's going on around that store, and then predicting an order. And this order is making it to our customer via a chat platform. And the customer is, of course, has the flexibility of changing the order, but we're seeing more and more adoption of these orders where the customer then accepts the order, places it with us, and then we service, of course, fulfill the order. But that now doesn't require us to go to a store, 2 times, once to take the order, then once to service it. We just have to go to the store once to service it. So that brings, we don't need that many feet on the ground anymore in the COVID scenario. Another one that's very popular with fintech, right, where telecalling has been around for a while. Now we are also bringing that intelligence into telecalling, where instead of a chat platform, not every customer today is on, WhatsApp, or may even feel they have the necessary security or privacy concerns, so they don't want to, interact with us on a chat platform, but where we are telecalling them, and it's actually a intelligent bot that is talking to them, and having that conversation with them. So it's not a human on this side, but it's actually a machine that is again trained artificially, and then having the conversation and taking the order, processing the order, submitting it to our systems backend, and then of course we service the orders. So just a couple of examples that where we are leveraging AI even in the COVID scenario, and it's really helping us deal with the new normal.
Sanjay, thank you. One of the things, obviously, far as Mondelēz is concerned, a lot of this is comfort food, right? So did you see a heightened demand during the COVID period for all of this comfort food as people got locked down and was staying quarantined? Did you see a spike in demand for comfort foods like Cadbury's and Oreo cookies? And
again, not to get into the specifics, but absolutely, of course, we are all, and we can look at ourselves as consumers, right? We are stockpiling on biscuits. We are stockpiling on health foods like, or health drinks like a Bonvita. So of course, the demands, in those some categories are going exponentially higher, but then in other categories are being compensated, right? I mean, think of, are we stockpiling on chocolates as much and things like that. So there are puts and takes. Of course, some of our categories are seeing a big rise, and I think we can all look into our own pantries and figure out which of those categories are on the rise. Though I do feel privileged to work for a snacking company today that is, yes, it's an impulse buy, but still it's a brand, and we were voted as the most iconic brand. So it's a brand we all resonate with and are, of course, filling our pantries with. And hopefully all of us continue to do that. But it's a put and take. One of the interesting learnings is our gum products are not doing as well, because we've realized people can't wear masks and chew gum at the same time. It's not a very convenient thing. Have candy, right? Like our Halls brand. So we're seeing again a decline there, but in countries where the masks are coming off, the candies are moving back, right? So it's interesting how we're learning a lot of things in this new normal. And our engines, and again, we are leveraging AI, right? The engine that had learned a lot on the data from the past. Of course, a lot of that may not even be valid now, and it's learning fast from the new data that's coming in. But a good question, yeah.
Interesting. Let's go over to Guru. Guru, you're from PayPal. Obviously, demonetization was a big gift to you guys, right? I mean, I remember sitting at our networks and seeing a 30+% spike in online, these types of apps taking off through the roof. What are you seeing, especially now using AI, and obviously you've got tons of volume going through, second by second. So give us a feel for what it is from PayPal's perspective to deal with your customers using AI, and what you're seeing now, especially in the COVID area. Are you seeing any significant changes, patterns? Please.
Sure. Thanks, Ranjit. And to Sanjay, you're looking at a lifelong customer who is these chocolates. So, I've been a customer of yours for as long as I can remember, I'd say. So, but we may not be purveyors of comfort food. We help people buy that comfort food that they seek so desperately. So, Ranjit, to your point, our business, as is true for fintech around the world, we've been experiencing rapid growth even otherwise, and the COVID situation has actually accelerated it significantly. So we just announced our earnings a couple of days ago, and last week. And one thing we noticed in April, we added close to 8 million customers onto our platform around the world, which represents significant month-over-month increase. I mean, we are literally working day and night right now to onboard new customers onto our platform, because the propensity of people to use cash, which was always very high, is dramatically declining right now in a world where we don't want to be close to each other. We don't want to touch what another person touches, and money is something that goes from hand to hand to hand and can be an amazing vector for transmission of various illnesses. And especially in the COVID situation, it's something that many people are very wary of. So you're right. Much like demonetization provided an amazing boost, the COVID situation is also doing that for us. And when it comes to specifically AI and machine intelligence, we actually like to think of AI less as artificial intelligence, and we like to think of it more as augmented intelligence, because we find that that intersection of human intelligence and machine intelligence is where the magic lies. And for us, to give you a sense of the scale at which we operate, we have close to $1 trillion in total payment volume that we process in a given year, and that number steadily continues to rise. And we are also looking at around 350 million customers that we have around the world. So on average, about 60 million customers or so reach out to us for help during the year. And this is even before the pre-COVID days. In fact, that number will rise even more now because we're getting more customers. So to use and probably abuse one of the phrases that you commonly hear today, for us to manage that scale, we have to flatten the curve. We cannot possibly keep using human agents to keep interacting with every single call that comes to us. We have to rely on machine intelligence. So we've been on a journey in customer service, especially in around one of the aspects of customer experience, where we are moving from what we would refer to earlier as a transactional relationship to a relational relationship with our customers, where the significant amount of data that we already have on our customers, how many times they transacted, what they transacted for, what are the different funding instruments they use to transact, etc. We have a thorough idea of their entire customer journey. And when they reach out to us, the magic moment for us is to be able to detect that intent even before they've had a chance to tell us why they're calling us. If we can subliminally detect from the signals in our system why they are calling us, provide a resolution that is an aha moment for them, provide customer delight in what might typically have been an issue that they wanted to call us because of, then the loyalty to the brand also goes up. So in that scenario, that's one of the cases we use machine intelligence. Another one is just risk and fraud. Any financial entity that moves mountains of money the way we do is inherently subject to a certain number of bad actors in the system trying to come in and siphon off. Even a small fraction of that will mean billions of dollars for people. So we actually, within 300 milliseconds, when a transaction is in progress, we apply hundreds of variables based on which we are able to detect whether this is a fraudulent transaction or not. And here is customer experience comes in, right? The best AI is when a customer doesn't even know that it's happening. It's invisible to the user, where they just see a lack of friction, but behind the scenes, it's actually artificial intelligence at work. So we have various ways in which we have to cope with what is essentially a scale problem. Because if you had 3 customers, you went to your neighborhood store, that person would know your entire journey, not just you. They probably might know your father and grandfather as well, and who got married when, what they bought, and what kind of oil you use, and why you're different from your dad, and all sorts of stuff. But blow it out to 350 million customers, I think the most astute of store managers might find it difficult to cope with that kind of scale. So this is where the magic moment for us comes. The use of our data, significant, we have close to 400 petabytes. Just to put that in context for your listeners, if you were to stack them all up as DVD drives and put them one on top of the other, that would be the height of 8 Mount Everest. That's the kind of data that we are talking about. And using that to deliver great customer experience, that's where augmented intelligence, which we know as AI.
Ameet, I'm sorry, Guru, that is fantastic. $1 trillion worth of transactions. The Indian economy is about 2.6 trillion. You're doing almost a third of the GDP of India, 350 million customers. Wow. So you can see why artificial intelligence becomes a big pull for you folks. But thanks for sharing that. Let me go over to Ameet. Ameet is, of course, McDonald's Who would have thought that McDonald's would need to get into AI? Here you are, a street. I go and I order food. I walk out. Ameet, I'm sure the business has changed for you. Share with us what AI has been doing for you at the food end of the business.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting listening to Guru talk about volume, and that's really the issue when you think about McDonald's on a global scale. We're feeding 1% of the world's population on a daily basis. We have 75 million transactions a day that incur with our clients, but we don't have that client intimacy. And a lot of that is because most of our clients are paying in cash and in other methods where we don't get to create a direct interaction with them. So a shift for us from more of a product-centric view to trying to create that client intimacy is incredibly important. Growing digital channels is one of the key areas for us to create that. And our view of pulling it all together is really the intersection. And I heard all of this actually in some of the people before me. It's the infrastructure. It's getting the data quality and then applying AI capabilities on top of that, whether it's NLP, whether it's machine learning models, to create that connection. And we're starting to do that more and more. And we're using that in things like next best offer, creating the right couponing methods in Japan. In other areas like in the United States, where drive-through is a critical part of the business, we're trying to create digital menu boards that are actually customized to clients as they come up by better having an understanding of their specific needs. Where we're using AI capability, it's going through that drive-through, potentially connecting to their to their license plate of their car to know this is client X, and then creating that digital menu board based on their buying behavior. So all of a sudden, what you're seeing from a McDonald's perspective is this constant interaction in a multiple set of areas, not just in just the front office client facing, but how do we use back office areas such as our supply chain and operations? Where can we apply machine learning and other models to help improve the client experience as well? So it is kind of an end-to-end flow at McDonald's today. I will tell you that as we start to grow into different countries, what we also find is that machine learning has been critical in helping us understand the differences in different cultures and identifying opportunities for us to continue to grow. So it's been a fantastic thing that's happening in a multi-set of fronts within McDonald's.
So, Ameet, when artificial intelligence starts pervasively impacting something like McDonald's, as you rightly said, was very transactional, you see that, you really have to pay attention to what AI is doing in just about all of our business. But thanks for sharing that. Let me go over to Tim. Tim, thank you for waking up. I know it's 4 o'clock, I suppose, somewhere close there in the morning. So thank you for your dedication. You interact very heavily with CIOs as part of your responsibilities at AVOA. You have things that you share. So share with us what the CIOs are kind of looking at, addressing, and what are the hotspots, if you will, of AI and CIO world.
Yeah, thank you very much. It is a little early here, 20 minutes after 4 in the morning, but I'm grateful to take part in the conversation. There are a number of things that I just want to kind of piggyback on that were already mentioned, but kind of maybe add a little more color to them. And when we think about artificial intelligence and customer experience, and especially in this time of COVID, where it's really turned companies upside down, it's turned them into a position where they really have to think differently. And the companies that I'm working with and conversations that I have with fellow CIOs, it really comes back to how do we differentiate our business from our competition, and how do we create value and a stronger relationship with our customers? Some of the comments that were made earlier around recommendation engines and creating predictive analytics or using machine learning to learn more about buying behaviors. Companies are actually looking to even go beyond that to say, in a recommendation engine, okay, maybe folks will buy X product when they're looking at A and B products. What they're looking at now, especially in light of COVID, is how does inventory change? And maybe I don't want to recommend that X product because we just don't have inventory of it right now, but maybe there's a second tier product that we can recommend as part of that. The sheer amount of data that companies are having to contend with right now, humans can no longer wrap their arms around. So even before COVID, even before the coronavirus crisis hit the world, the reality was we had crossed the threshold where we could no longer rely on human interactions. We had to shift gears. We had to look at ways to bring in new sources of data, whether that's, and this gets a little beyond the customer experience piece, whether that's machine learning in factory floor operations, or even looking at loyalty systems. You know, we've talked a little bit about grocery and how you start to understand buying behaviors, and that might change your supply chains accordingly. And maybe you need to be more diverse in your supply chain. I'm working with companies right now that they're actually looking to do just that. They're realizing through this COVID crisis that there's a real change that needs to happen because employees aren't necessarily available. And it's not just the employees within your company, it might be employees within your ecosystem or partners within your ecosystem. I mean, if you are working with a company that is in a current hotspot, you may have trouble producing. Here in the US, I live in California. I know earlier you mentioned Las Vegas. I'm actually based in Los Angeles, not too far from Las Vegas. But here in the US, one of the challenges we have is around just getting certain products into market and the different supply chains and distribution chains that affect that. And so this becomes a real challenge where AI can really fit in to understand not just predictive behaviors and make recommendations, but start to really kind of look down the road a little bit. And I think this is where companies that are thinking ahead are really going. They're looking beyond creating the bots that interact with customers and creating that closer relationship. And I know we'll talk about privacy in a bit, because that's another aspect to all of this. But they're looking at how do we start to get to a point where we can predict the behaviors of our company and our customers before they even know what they're going to be looking for. And this is somewhat of the holy grail, especially as we get beyond the augmented piece, as was mentioned earlier, and we get to a truly artificial intelligence piece where the data starts telling us things that we haven't asked of it yet. And that's when things can get scary, because now you have a computer that's essentially telling you what you need to do and what you need to hear. But we are a long ways off from that. But there are a lot of opportunities right now, regardless of whether you're in grocery or food service or the airline and hospitality space. Fintech, fraud was mentioned. That's a huge opportunity for AI. And as I mentioned, it all comes back to we're looking at how to leverage this pile of data. And that pile is growing exponentially every single day. So we have to figure out how to get our arms around that. Loyalty is another key piece, especially as you start thinking about customer engagement. How do you start to understand where, and companies are actually doing this, customer walks into the store, and that customer might be, because of the loyalty program, that customer might be prone to buying shirts or pants in that retail store. But they go in that particular time, and you know that they're in there because they have their loyalty program on their mobile device. So they walk in with their mobile device. You know that Tim Crawford is in the store. You know that Tim Crawford does buy shirts from that store. Maybe it's a clothing store, men's clothing store of the sort. But this particular time, Tim has left the store and has not purchased a shirt. Well, what would be better is to immediately identify that and send a coupon to Tim's mobile device saying, hey, you know, if you go back right now, we'll offer you 5% off or 10% off that shirt. It's much easier to get the customer back into the store to make that purchase in real time than if you were to wait by sending an email to the customer and then they have to get back in their car or get back online and go back to that website to make the purchase. It's these kinds of experiences that are really kind of changing the behaviors of both customers as well as companies, especially as they start to think about how do we shift online And no longer do we have employees in our stores working. In the case of COVID, we have to think about how to shift to an online business. And that is going to require intelligence, and that is requiring AI as part of that.
Thank you, Tim, for that perspective. I'm sure very, very important in terms of look at the business and the opportunities. Let me go to this whole issue where we are talking about data, but the real value of this data is emanating from the customer. You know, the customer's preferences, choices, actions, intent, all of this, and that's really what you want to begin to start mining. Now, when you are dealing with that, obviously, you're dealing with the whole issue of trust and privacy, and the customer is basically now saying, my gosh, what else do they have for me? If they know before I enter the store that, you know, my preferences, my choices, and I get a coupon, how scary is that? And you wonder, okay, what else have they got, and what else are they keeping? And so the whole issue of the trust factor in dealing with issues of privacy, let's go back and maybe you can start again addressing that, and we'll go backwards on the panel. So tell us, Tim, what do you see in this whole issue of trust and privacy with the customer when you're dealing with AI?
And it's a very critical point. If you and your company are not thinking about trust first and foremost, you need to stop and back up and think about that. Because if you lose trust with your customer, nothing else matters. You know, I think about some of my fellow panelists here and think about each of their brands and each of their companies. And that comes back to people have trust in those brands. People have trust in those companies. And it's no different with those folks that are watching us today. You have to build trust. And so, of course, there is a legal framework that gets put in place, whether it's DPA in India or GDPR for those folks that engage in the EU, or here in California, we have the CCPA, which is the California Consumer Privacy Act. And all of them have very similar themes, which is how do you start to protect data? If you go back to what I was saying earlier about the just piles of data that we have, we can actually learn a lot about an individual and their buying habits and their behaviors. And what's interesting about that, as well as scary, is the amount of data that is available publicly today is phenomenal. And what I mean by that is I can predict some of the things that you do that you may not even realize that you're doing today. The challenge is we as brands, we as companies, we have to think about what's the right balance to keep that trust with our customers, but at the same time, leverage that data as much as we can and make sure that we're not eroding that trust by misusing that data. So you want to be careful that you don't look like you know too much about the customer, but at the same time, you want to know a lot about the customer as much as you can. And that is a balancing act that we have to think about as we look at regulatory compliance and privacy.
So let me go to Sanjay. Sanjay, I know you have a hard stop, but just stay with us for 2 minutes. You know, obviously Mondelēz had customer predicting comfort food use or whatever else. Cadbury's, you know, when do you want, at 12 o'clock at night, do you want a Cadbury snack? But very quickly, how do you deal with the whole issue of trust and privacy in terms of your customers?
I mean, data privacy and security is a major concern, you know, for some of the reasons pointed out, especially in the space of artificial intelligence, because all AI solutions deal with tons of data. I think, Rajan, you also kind of referenced that, right? So safeguarding or securing this data becomes even more important because of what this data is also about. It's about whether it's our consumers, consumer preferences, or it's our customers. And, you know, in many cases, this may be also, the data may also be giving our firm a competitive advantage versus our competition in the market. So yes, trust is key, but we treat this very, very, you know, in a very, very important manner. This is at the forefront. So whenever we jump into solutions or capabilities like this, the first question I will always ask is, are we legally secure? Do we have all the right protocols in place? Yes, we want to, run fast and bring these solutions alive as fast as we can. And you can easily fall into a trap of, this world is exploding. I mean, there's so much innovation, so much disruption happening in this space that people want to jump in. But it is equally important for firms like ourselves to really make sure that security and privacy is in place, that in no way or shape we are compromising on any information we are collecting about our customers or about our consumers, and in all the channels that we may be collecting this information. Because today, one of the other challenges is there are so many channels that we are collecting this or getting this information by. So you have to be very, very careful that we are very selective. Also, in what information we store within our firm, what we are allowed to legally store, and what we are not. So we have to make sure all those checks and balances are also done. But yes, a very, very important topic.
Thank you, Sanjay. I know you have to leave, but again, thanks for being on and sharing with us your insights. Let me go back at McDonald's again. Part of the trust that you built up over decades is the quality of the food, right? Now, again, you're getting into data, mining, all of this. Talk to us about what trust and privacy means for you at McDonald's.
Sure, yeah, and I think it's in line with both what Tim and Sanjay said. I think at this point in the game, brand value can be so quickly impacted if there is any type of breach with any of the data, especially when you start talking about PII-related information. So one of the things that we've spent a significant amount of time on is trying to understand, when we keep information, what information we're keeping. Can we do it more on an anonymized basis, or do we really require specific and unique customer data? And if we do require specific, unique customer data, how do we ensure that we are doing the right things to protect it? Well above and beyond, GDPR, CCPA, all of these regulations are critical and important, but we've got to go one step further to make sure that we are really, truly keeping the protection at the level that we feel confident that we will never have that type of breach. I've had the opportunity to talk to several partners and chief analytic officers and companies like Equifax and even Target, where there have been major breaches. And even 12 months, 18 months after, the recovery process, once something occurs, so much harder. You've got to be okay with making the investments on the front end to keep that protection at the highest levels. And so McDonald's is spending significant time and effort and energy around the governance model of how we manage data, and also come in with the mindset of keeping it from a minimalistic perspective. We don't want to hold information any longer than necessary. So every time we hold PII-related data, we have a really thoughtful review board that ensures that that's actually being used to create some value for our customers. And if it's not, then we make sure to go ahead and not keep it as a part of our retention strategy.
Well, I mean, that's pretty robust. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. You wanted to say something. Go ahead.
I'll take a slightly different view, right? So we all do today what's required by the law, and some of us do more, which is the privacy aspect of the data. How much do you retain, and so on. Some of us are highly regulated enough that we go above and beyond the law. But as a technologist, one of the beautiful things that happens in the world is the technology. The moment you have a problem, the technologies eventually emerge to go solve it, right? And make that rules and the laws that are sort of required to keep you within the sort of the bound sort of disappear. There are a couple of technologies that has been built in the past 2 to 3 years. One of them is called a federated learning. So if you think of AI, it has 3 aspects, right? One is the customer, the second bucket is his data, and third bucket is the model. Today, the reason why all the data is sucked in from your mobile device to a central repository is because the models today are geared towards building over a cloud, computing over a cloud, and all that stuff. But if you look at my phone, it's a Galaxy S9 Plus, has an AI chip, can run, and it's a 2-year-old phone, can run simple, like reasonably simple AI models in the phone itself. So that, the federated learning, what it says is to federate the data, let the data stay on the phone, let the compute happen, let the customers get the recommendations and everything, and all we upload are not the customer's data, but the results, the inferencing. So that in some sense is starting to chip away on the whole need for taking the data. So 2 years or 3 years from now, if I am one of the larger or the top, 5, 6 companies in the world, and if I'm still collecting the data, I'll flip the question and say, why are you collecting data? Federated learning is available at MIT. Both of these are coming out of on the left coast, Google, on the right coast, MIT. Federated learning, split learning, homomorphic encryption, which essentially assures that even when you send the learning from the models back to the central computer, these are privacy preserved. So the whole area of privacy preserved AI is exploding. It's exploding in the past 2 to 3 years. And if 3 years from now, 5 years from now, we have yet another summit where you meet, we'll have very different conversations. So the moment technology sees a problem, technology essentially goes ahead and says, let me solve the problem technically rather than, relying on people's goodwill and the speed at which legislators can keep up with the new innovations.
Thank you, Shantanu, for sharing that. Let me go to Guru. Guru, that touches the whole issue of trust and privacy other than when it comes to money. All right. So you're dealing with one of those things that really perks people's interest up when it comes to their money and how it's handled and what you know about my spending habits or whatever else. So tell me, when you're dealing with the whole privacy and as well as with the trust factor, how does PayPal address this issue in terms of managing this?
So you're bang on the money, Ranjit. And when for any business, I would argue that the trust between a business and the customer is what will generate and create long-term viability for that business, right? Never compromising on that trust. Trust will actually be fundamental to how AI will enable experiences with the right considerations of not just privacy, but also anonymization, consent, explainability, and deep responsibility towards the customer. For us at PayPal, just take a look at the fundamental premise on which our business is built. We as a company are an intermediary between buyers and sellers. And contrary to the old way of doing things, these are buyers and sellers who have no idea where each other is in the world. There is no prior trust that can be assumed anywhere in the system. And as an intermediary that is facilitating this payment between these, we are in some sense the arbiter of trust in that equation. So we are not so much in the payments business as we are in the trust business. Without trust, our business is non-existent. So for us, trust is a sacrosanct responsibility that not just fuels our business, but is in fact an existential need for our business. So yeah, at PayPal, we take this very, very seriously. So the controls that we have in place in terms of how we deal with data, the promise that we have to our customers that we will never share their financial information with anybody is something that we hold extremely dear to us as a fundamental value on which the company is based. But to expand a little on what Shantanu was talking, I absolutely agree with what he's saying, right? In AI, there's a concept of training, then there's the concept of adapting it to a particular use case, and then there's the concept of actually the inference itself, live real time when the experience is in play. Thanks to the large federated data sets, the anonymized public data sets that we have available right now, learning can happen even without any privacy being compromised. And then the model itself can be adapted by additional training on a smaller and more unique data set. And finally, you can compress it and deploy it, for example, on a phone. And one classic example is facial recognition. We're also used to it on our phones today. But not that every single face that model was trained on is stored on your phone. It was trained on a large data set, but you don't necessarily need it anymore when in real time, your phone has to recognize your face. So no doubt that companies that are able to use data like the way we have will have an advantage, but how can you do something with it in a way that guarantees the privacy and trust that customers have in you as a brand? That's what will make a difference between somebody who uses AI in a responsible way and somebody who is there to make a quick buck, uses AI and then loses trust, and finally they will not have a viable business.
Guru, I like what you said. Trust is your business. And when we do that, I think we're all in deep doo-doo. By the way, thank you all. I think our time's up, and so let me hand back to Iti But thank you all for participating. Great thoughts. More time, but hopefully we've had a good discussion about some of these aspects of AI and the customer. Thank you all for sharing so openly and concisely. Back to ET and conclude this, please.
Thank you,
Thank
Rajan.
you all for joining us. Thank you all. It was an enlightening session indeed.